What's good, everybody? Let me tell you something. The things that you do today have the potential to change the world. Chew on that for a minute. I want to talk about the novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. I want to talk about how I believe it makes an excellent case study for the importance of the effect one person can have on a society. It's an incredibly depressing book, and there's a lot that happens that is really messed up. But I think it's worth it to examine this downer of a book in order to glean some knowledge that's worth having. If you're not familiar with the novel, or you haven't read it in a hot minute, here's a tiny little recap of it in 30 seconds or less. Chief Bromden is a mental patient. His ward is controlled by Nurse Ratched, who maintains order through humiliation and electroshock therapy. A guy named McMurphy shows up as a new patient and immediately challenges her authority. His defiance rallies the other patients. The struggle between the Ratched and the McMurphy finally comes to a head. McMurphy attacks her after an injustice and she has him lobotomized. Chief Bromden then smothers him in a mercy killing and escapes into the night. Alright, my peeps. Class is in session. Let's discuss. If you want to make a difference, you've got to be willing to give something up. Make some sacrifices up in here. It could be your social status, your physical security, or in extreme cases, your actual life. In the novel, McMurphy gives up his chance to escape the institution, and then finally his life as he goes head-to-head with the tyrant Nurse Ratched. In the beginning, it seems like he's just riling her up for kicks, but then he realizes how tight of a hold she has over the other men, and how scared they actually are. And his little bouts of rebellion go through a purpose shift. He's not just trying to maintain his own sanity, he's trying to win back the brains of all the men around him as well. All the men who have been beaten into submission over the years. The final showdown with Nurse Ratched is ultimately what spells the end for him. She does him dirty with the lobotomization, but it wasn't all for nothing. The tiny little seeds of rebellion have been planted, and the other patients soon take advantage and bust the heck out of there. Throughout the history of the world, there have been people who stood up to the Nurse Ratcheds of time. People who fought the good fight, knowing that it was probably going to cost them an arm and a leg. Literally. People like Martin Luther King Jr., who made it his life's mission to end racial injustice. He was arrested and threatened and in the end assassinated because of what he believed in. Or Rosa Parks. She did a lot of stuff, but the main thing that she is remembered for is not giving up her seat to a white guy on a bus. A ballsy move for an old lady that ended up being a major player in the movement that reshaped American culture. Or even Miep Gies, the woman who sheltered Anne Frank's family during the war. She hid that family for 2 whole years, all the while knowing she could be arrested and shipped off to hell at any moment. All of these peeps could have just sat on their hands and watched the world continue on its merry way, but they didn't, and neither did McMurphy. They stood up for what they believed to be right and paid the price, and their sacrifice is what brought about the change. Now you may be thinking to yourself, well, that's wonderful for them. I'm so glad they did the right thing. But I, personally, am no MLK. I don't have those public speaking chops or motivation that can move a nation. I'm just a poor florist in a shop. Well, let me hit you with the good news. You don't have to be MLK to change the world. You just need a little courage. And if that scares you, then so much the better. Scared people have more opportunities to practice when courage is defined as the ability to do something that frightens you, or strength in the face of fear. McMurphy, for instance, starts off the novel as the opposite of a hero. He's a gambler and a con man who just views the hospital as a way to get out of working in the fields. But it doesn't matter that he starts out as such a rocky character, because once he sees the need, he takes action. He's not going to bow the knee to Nurse Crazy, and that stance is what inspires the other patients to rediscover what it means to be human. They only take action because of McMurphy. He's a prime example that it's not who you start off as that matters, it's what you do when you see the opportunity. Your old history books will back me up on this. In 1989, there was a guy who has forever been branded as Tank Man because he stood in Tiananmen Square in China and wouldn't let a column of tanks keep driving. He wasn't some political leader or famous person, he was literally just some businessman who saw something happening that wasn't right and decided he wasn't going to let it slide. There was no one else out there with him standing in front of the tanks. Just a regular guy on a regular day. Kind of like you, on a day like today. Anyway, nobody really knows what happened to him, but his simple act of defiance made a real difference, and he didn't even need a college degree to do it. One part about this sacrificing biz is that the effects of that sacrifice might not be visible right off the bat. In the story, McMurphy never does actually escape the hospital or even see the other patients liberated. But for us as viewers with an outside perspective, it's pretty clear that the things he did had a big impact. For Chief Bromden especially. Before McMurphy came onto the ward, he was broken and beaten down, so much so that everyone in the ward assumed that he was deaf and mute. But through McMurphy's stand up and take action vibes, Bromden is able to reclaim his voice and even break the heck out of that crazy house. It's a symbolic victory that proves that the sacrifice McMurphy made wasn't for nothing. This kind of thing happened a lot in the real world. A lot of times the revolutionaries or activists fighting for change never see what a difference their efforts make. But nowadays we can look back and say, yep, that guy shaped the future. Again, MLK is a good example. The movement that he was pushing forward was not finished by the time he was assassinated. You could actually make the case that these heroes needed to die to become the catalyst that made the change stick, but that's a topic for another video. Lots of women in the suffrage movement aged out before the women they were fighting for actually got the vote. Nowadays, it's just part of our lives and we don't question it, but it's all thanks to those women way back who took a stand. It's a bummer fact of life, but a lot of the time, change doesn't happen overnight, or even over a year in a lot of cases. When thinking about why you are taking a stand, it's important to focus on long-term goals versus short-term, and also to remember that things have steadily been getting better for a long time and will probably continue that way. McMurphy shows us how it's done. He starts off small. He doesn't want to take a shower when he first gets there. He makes fun of Nurse Ratched in group therapy. He makes a bet with the other patients that he can rile the nurse up. When they are all viewed by their lonesome, they don't appear to make that big of a difference, but as a progression of events, they can be seen as the beginnings of a decision for resistance. It's a bunch of small steps versus one giant leap of heroism. There's a point where you can tell that all the fun and games and poking the bear turn into something a little more intentional. That point is the protest that happens during the World Series. Nurse Ratched won't let them watch the game, so McMurphy just sits in front of the TV screen and enjoys himself as he pretends to watch. It takes a minute. All the other patients are not sure what to do, but one by one they join him in front of the blank TV. All of a sudden the vibe goes from one stubborn guy taking a stand to a whole room of defiant cuckoos. Perfect example of how one person, with the drive to stand firm, can inspire everyone else to do the same. Now this story is nice and all. Well, honestly it's not that nice. It's a real bummer of a story actually. But what are the implications for you as a human? Or I guess for me as a human, because I'm a person too. The real world is a lot less cut and dry than the novel. Bromden and McMurphy are going through extremely dehumanizing things that are pretty clearly fight-backable. But what about your life? It's probably not as cut and dry. Do you have a teacher who is kind of a butt? Do you have a boss that occasionally makes sexist remarks? Is someone in your friend group a toxic a-hole? What do you do in these situations where it seems like maybe someone should do something, but maybe you are also just overreacting or being too sensitive? Well, I'm not there in your situation, so I can't give you more specific advice, but I can say this. If there's something in your gut that is telling you the thing that is happening is wrong and needs to stop, don't ignore that feeling. You don't have to boycott the school or stand on a desk and call out a rude teacher. You can do smaller things like talk to other students who are also experiencing these things and give feedback to staff. Or if your friend is toxic, you can say things like, "I don't like that." Honestly, even the small things are going to be difficult, and I'm not going to tell you that I know how to sort these situations out, because I definitely don't. But what I can tell you is that if 1 million people take one small step outside of their comfort zone and do something about what they believe is right, then that's probably going to result in one slightly larger step for humanity as a whole. Your kids will probably thank you. Or not. Kids aren't known for their recognition of the previous generation's sacrifice. All I'm saying is do it for the kids, okay? Thanks for tuning in this week. Subscribe for more talks about why classic novels are depressing, and I'll catch you in a place where the nurse can't find you.